Assalamu alaikum. My name is Tesneem and I recently finished wrapping up Religious Minorities Part 2. For those of you guys who need a refresher on my first paper, I basically just gave some general guidelines. You know, what were the rights, responsibilities of religious minorities under Muslim rule? And one thing I had noticed was that whether it was directly or indirectly asked was, you know, people were concerned about, is it enough really? What's the big deal? Should we really be patting ourselves on the back? We let them practice their religion, sure, but they still had certain limitations and they still had certain responsibilities. And so what I wanted to do in the second paper, I wanted to take a more theoretical or conceptual approach to understanding religious minorities. And I basically wanted to ask the questions of, why don't we think it's enough? You know, what do we define as tolerance and as liberty? And where are we getting these ideas from? So to be clear right off the bat, again, as I said, in my first paper, what I had done was I laid out the facts that religious minorities were allowed to maintain their faith identities, they were allowed to practice their religion, and they were allowed to continue their legal systems. And, you know, so then we asked the question, well, is it a big deal? Actually, it is. It's a huge deal, because when you think about it, you know, the enlightened West or Europe at the time, which is supposed to, you know, be more civilized than the rest of the world, it took them until the 17th century before they even considered the option that a nation's subject could have a different religion than the ruler. You know, the Catholic Church is notorious for this. They persecuted any religious minority, including other Christians, if they weren't a part of if they were different sects, if they weren't part of Catholicism. And so, you know, even we're talking about post-Enlightenment, when we're starting to shift away from the notion of religion as identity, it wasn't until 1648, until the signing of the Peace of Westphalia treaties, that Europe, you know, decided to end years and decades of fighting and said, well, I guess we can consider, you know, people having a different religion than us. This is just a consideration. This wasn't, you know, a protection of religious minorities. This was, we'll consider this idea and, you know, possibly allow it. 17th century. Let that sink in for a second. Muslims were doing this centuries beforehand. So the question I really want to address, the question I really wanted to get into in this paper is that, why is it that, you know, Muslims take the blame of, historical Muslim empires are accused of intolerance and you know, wrong treatment, intolerance to the religious minorities, when that's definitely not the case. And so what I do in this paper is that I sort of summarize the different ideologies that dominate Western societies and dictate to us what tolerance and liberty is. And then we take those notions and then we retrospectively impose those modern ideals on history, only on, you know, non-European countries. We don't think about it in the sense of, well, wait, Europe was sort of much more behind than the Muslim empire. For some reason, we were able to take that and say, well, look, the Muslims did it all wrong. Look, the Muslims were so oppressive. But in fact, we were ahead of the game, you know, before any European nation. And so it was really fun to write this paper, and really, you know, it was really exciting just to see the different approaches, different theories that have been posed, and to sort of examine those. So I look forward to sharing this paper with you guys all, and I look forward to reading your feedback. So jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.